Hello, everyone. I want to offer an analysis of the killing of Rayshard Brooks. So he is a black man who fell asleep at I believe it was a Wendy's drive-through. He was drunk, fell asleep. Cops came over. They asked him to get out of the car. They measured his alcohol level. They attempted to handcuff him and put him under arrest for DUI. And at that point, he fled. He got into a into a scuffle with the two police officers on the scene. He pulled a taser from them, and then he fled. And at that point, one of the cops shot him, and he died. So, in my opinion, a lot of things went wrong here. A lot of things went wrong. And first of all, before I say anything, I want to premise this by saying that misbehavior on the part of cops is, in my opinion, not related at all, virtually at all, to racial issues. I know that right now we are very much focused on racial issues, but in my opinion, that cops do a poor job policing, and they don't use good judgment at all. And there isn't any evidence, in my opinion, that this is racially linked. In general, they just make bad judgments. And right now, we are so hyper-focused on race that all we see is race. It's kind of like the old adage that if you're a hammer, then all you see is nails, right? So all you see is race. But it's just overall bad decisions here. So let me just say, now, race could have been a very, very small factor here, like it could be in many other cases. But the most egregious part of what happened here is not race-based, and I'll explain. Okay, so first of all, number one, I'm gathering that the Wendy's management is the one who called the police, right? And so the first question I'm asking is, why are you calling the police? Now, I know that there are something that's called nuisance abatement laws. I am not familiar, disclaimer, I am not familiar with these laws. I don't know, I've never heard of them before yesterday. I read an article in the New York Times about it. And that article implied that the owners of Cup Food, which called the cops against George Floyd for that counterfeit bill, they claimed that they were required to call the police based on that law. So I don't know exactly how this law works. But if such a law exists, I would have to really take a look at it really close. I would suspect that the law is meant to give cover for a merchant so that the merchant can tell the customer, hey, I'm not doing it because I want to be a bad guy. I'm just required by law. And I see a lot of legal maneuvering in this vein happening nowadays, because everyone always wants to act as if it's not their choice. I just have to do it. Because this way you can't get angry at me, because people get angry all the time, right? And so you can't get angry at me. I'm just following orders. And if that's the case, then obviously it's a bad law, because people have to take personal responsibility. We have to just return personal responsibility to people, to merchants, to customers, to everyone. And so the merchant has to be the one deciding whether they want to call the police or not. And if they do want to call the police, then that's their right. And a customer should never be able to confront or harass or retaliate against a merchant who believes that, because remember, at the end of the day, they can ask you to leave, period. They can ask you never to come back, period. It's their private property. And people need to understand that there is no right for any individual to walk into a store, to shop, to browse, to do anything. So, but anyway, that's completely beside the point. Bottom line is this. The first mistake that was made is that Wendy's should not have called the police. Wendy's should have, the manager on duty should have walked over to the car, knocked on the window. I don't know. I don't know the details. Maybe they did. I'm gathering that they did. I'm hoping that they made some type of effort to awaken this guy and to get him to move, to keep moving. What I'm guessing happened is that they gently knocked on the window and he didn't wake up, and so they called the police. This is what I'm guessing happened. I don't think he was confrontational and combative. So like I said, so that's something that I don't understand. If he doesn't wake up, you knock harder until he wakes up. And at that point, he is going to move his vehicle. He's not doing it on purpose. It's not deliberate. He was drunk and he passed out. in front of a Wendy's, right? He stopped the car and he's waiting, and in the meantime, he fell asleep. So there's nothing sinister or criminal so far. Now, I'm going to get to the DUI in a moment, but simply just falling asleep while in a drive-through, there's nothing wrong with that act per se. And so as far as Wendy's is concerned, just knock on his window, keep knocking until he wakes up. You're not dealing with a criminal here, so far as the overt behavior that you can detect here. Like there's nothing here, there's no malicious intent here. So just wake him up and get him to move on. So that's the first mistake. Mistake number two, when the cops are called, again, the cops assume that because we are called, there must be something serious happening. We got to take some decisive action here. And again, that's not true. And again, I see this so many times when cops become overly confrontational just because a call was made. In other words, this very same behavior that if they had observed it themselves, they might not have done anything at all about it. But because it was called in, right, now they think, oh, it's official. It's part of the report. It's an incident. And they basically escalate unintentionally. But they basically escalate that incident when it shouldn't have been escalated. All they have to do, their primary mission is to just remove this obstacle, this impediment to drive through traffic. That's all they got to do. They don't have to do anything else. Now, if they want to do anything else, they could, but that would be already their judgment, and it would be based on whatever their mandate, whatever their mission is. Based on the context, et cetera, and the law, et cetera. So there was no need to escalate. So, which brings me to the other question. So they walk over, they ask him to identify himself, Rayshard Brooks, and he gets out of the car. So far, he's cooperating. They put some device into his, it's not a breathalyzer, but something that measures alcohol level. I'm guessing the reading was high. He's not exhibiting so far any combative behavior. He's cooperating, and he says something to the effect of, whatever, I just fell asleep. Just let me go. I'll move on. And at this point, I'm watching this video. I'm like, why are you not letting him go? Now, the cop is going to tell me, oh, the reason I can't let him go is because it's a DUI. He was driving under the influence. But DUI is when someone is actually driving. When you catch somebody driving erratically on the highway, that's DUI. Not somebody is parked in a drive-through, in a Wendy's drive-through, and fell asleep. Now, you're inferring that in order for him to have gotten into the driveway, he must have driven here. Okay, I hear you, but that's not the same as somebody driving in a highway doing 70, 80 miles per hour under the influence. It's different. So this is the first thing that a cop of a modicum of intelligence would immediately recognize. You're not dealing here with somebody who is an immediate threat to public safety. This is a much lesser degree. And so, in other words, this is something that it's not a stark violation. It's debatable. And I would surmise that if this came to court, there would be a lot of possible defenses that a suspect could give to a judge for this type of behavior. Like, for example, it's just a very typical, a very easy type of defense is they would say, hey, I just drank I drank like literally, 20 feet from here, 20 yards from here, and I just got into the car and I drove to the Wendy's. Now, would that be driving under the influence? Come on, he drove 30 feet and maybe he was just living right around the corner, right? So again, if you want to be really technical, yes, it's a DUI, but driving 10 miles per hour for 100 feet, come on, just give me a break, okay? Let's be realistic, all right? There's a lot bigger fish to fry out there. You don't need to go crazy and put handcuffs on someone. So, you know what I'm saying? So there are, this is not the same. So let's just keep this in perspective. This is not outrageous behavior. This is not the crime of the century. So let's just, so the cop did not need to put the handcuffs on him, which brings me to the other question, which is, I don't understand why law enforcement, police officers, anywhere and everywhere, whenever they suspect somebody of committing a felony, they just arrest them. And I never understood this because, for example, President Trump, he was officially charged, was officially arraigned, and it's a term they use legally when you're officially charged. Not arraignment. Indicted, right? He was officially indicted with crimes and misdemeanors. Now, under normal circumstances, if this happens to an ordinary person, you put him in handcuffs, you put him in jail, unless they post bail, right? Which I suppose that if you're the president of the United States, the bail should be really, really high, right? So, but they didn't do this to Trump. They don't do it to any white-collar suspects. And to me, this is the biggest issue, I think, that the issue of our times. And I think the protesters are completely missing the point here. This is the elephant in the room, really. It's not about race. It's not about anything else. The bigger issue here is that the discrimination isn't between races. The discrimination is between white-collar versus blue-collar crime. When somebody is being accused of DUI, they immediately put handcuffs on him. If somebody is accused of, I don't know, embezzling the government, okay, hire a lawyer, right? Hire a lawyer and you post bail. Like, what is the basis of putting handcuffs on him? You give him a summons to appear in court. Hey, you're gonna be charged. You just tell him, hey, I'm gonna file a charge against you. I'm gonna submit it to the DA, and you're gonna be criminally charged, and move on. Is there a risk that he would flee? I suppose so. There's always a risk that somebody would flee, but you can't assume. You're assuming guilt. You're assuming ill will. You can't assume that an ordinary person, you have no evidence, no information that this person is bad, right? Other than the actual behavior that they've just exhibited. And so there's no basis on that alone to believe or suspect that they won't show up in court. So you give him that summons, you tell him you have to appear in court to answer those charges, and that's it, and let the judge handle it. So I don't see any need to put handcuffs on him. Now, again, going back to what I said previously, if this person was a real DUI, I get it. I still am not completely comfortable with this, because I think that the more reasonable thing to do is, and this would have been, in my opinion, the correct procedure here would have been for the cop to say, hey, okay, I get it. Okay, so you drank, you fell asleep. Okay, I'm not sure what happened until now, but right now you can't drive. So people have cell phones now. So just do me a favor, Mr. Brooks, call a friend, call a neighbor, call a family member, anyone, come over and let them drive you home. And then the cop should proceed to actually stand there and wait until this person is driven home by a sober driver. That would have been a very reasonable thing to do. And as to whether to charge him with DUI, you can leave that for the court later. What's the point of arresting him? I just don't get it at all. I mean, this is clearly a ambiguous case. It's not clear cut. And like I said, even if it is clear cut, you can still give him a summons and a citation. You still don't have to arrest him. You still don't have to put handcuffs on him. This whole putting handcuffs and arresting is just overwrought. Now, when would it be appropriate, you ask me, to handcuff someone? And the answer is when a person poses an immediate threat to another, either to the police or to the person who called the cops on them, whatever it is. If it's something, if the criminal act, the suspected criminal act, is still ongoing in some way, or the threat is still ongoing in some way, at that point, yes, of course, you got to restrain the individual, you got to arrest him, possibly put him in jail, etc. But when, again, going back to what I said, or here's another case in which arresting would be appropriate. If the person actually has a record of not showing up to court to answer charges, that would be a different thing, right? So now you've actually proven yourself that you don't answer, you're not accountable for the charges that are being levied against you. And so you levy tax, you level charges. Okay, so yeah, at that point, yes, it would be sensible to arrest. But again, if this person is otherwise an upright citizen, and again, you don't have any evidence, I don't see any information that this person had prior convictions or any prior record. So if this is the first thing, so okay, you give him the ticket and you move on. So okay, so that's the second mistake. Third mistake. Okay, so you want to arrest this individual, and this person is putting up a resistance, starts to scuffle with you, starts to tussle with you, and in that scuffle, he grabs your taser. So you were unsuccessful in tasing him, and instead he grabbed it and he runs. So at this point, he's running away from you with your weapon, okay, your taser. I put it in quotes because it's not something that could really, seriously hurt you. It's something that's really meant to temporarily disable someone, to neutralize a threat, but it's not something that can do like serious damage. I mean, in some cases it has done, but it's not meant to, that's for sure. Certainly not in the hands of, I think that in someone who's not trained could be argued that someone who's not trained to use it is even a greater threat, but normally you would think that if they're not trained, they might not even be able to use it at all. So anyway, so they're running away from you with your taser. So again, at this point, what's happening here is this cop is panicking. Hey, he has my weapon and I got to do something about it. And then he pulls out his gun and he shoots at him. So this was another mistake. So this cop made actually two mistakes. The first mistake is arresting him in the first place. The second mistake is shoot at him because he's running away from him with his taser. Now, if he's lunging at the cop with a taser, that would be different. If he's lunging at the cop with a gun, he would be justified. That would be a justified killing. But of course, that wasn't the case. He was running away with a taser. Now, I would argue even that if he's running away even with a gun, you shouldn't shoot him. Now, this is already, I know a lot of law enforcement officers would say, oh no, that's crazy. He took my gun away and he's running away. But think about it in a civilian context. Imagine if somebody grabbed a civilian's gun, okay, because that civilian is threatening him. So you grab that gun away from him in order to neutralize that threat, and then I'm running away with his gun. I'm not coming back at him with a gun. I'm just taking that gun away from him because that civilian is threatening me. Would that be the basis of killing me? Of course not. And so I think that we have, so obviously, I'm not going to say that cops are held to the same standards as a civilian fight. Okay? Cops are always, they can lawfully use greater force, and people are lawfully required to submit to their use of greater force than a civilian does. And so I get it. I understand that part. But at the same time, when you are killing someone, when you're shooting someone, you better have a good reason to do that. And simply that person having your taser and running away from you is not the basis of doing that. So this guy, he either doesn't know the standards. I mean, I highly doubt that obviously that police department did not have protocol that calls for shooting someone running away with a taser. So he obviously violated the protocol, but he panicked. This is a terrible thing, which brings me to the last mistake that was made, which is this is not murder. So somebody who kills someone based on a spur of the moment, they become emotional and they panic, that is clearly not murder. Any type of emotionally driven killing, in fact, is not first-degree murder. But in this case, it's even weaker because it's not just that it was emotionally driven, it was driven by panic, by fear and by panic. And so, yeah, he wasn't properly trained. That's clearly an issue. And I think it reflects more as a flaw in the department, more than anything else, I think, because the question that I would ask is, how does the department train their officers? Is there any training done in order to assuage cops in a type of situation, to calm them down in a type of situation that is likely to evince fear and a panic reaction by many people? And justifiably so, by the way. There's been a lot of cop murders going on, so it's not something that is unjustifiable, but still you have to use an appropriate response. So, so many mistakes made here. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.